Absolute bedlam at Ibrox, and I still don't think the heartbeat's properly settled. One minute you're staring at what feels like a season-defining collapse. The next you're watching Celtic drag themselves off the canvas and punch back when it mattered most. It finished level, but that scoreline barely scratches the surface of what unfolded in that derby. This wasn't just another match between Celtic and Rangers. This was chaos, nerves, pride, and pressure all rolled into 90 relentless minutes. Coming into the game, I genuinely felt the weight was heavier on Rangers. From a Celtic point of view, of course there's always expectation, but when you look at recent weeks and the scrutiny building around their manager, the atmosphere inside Ibrox was tense before a ball was even kicked. They needed a statement. They needed authority. For Celtic, it was about resilience, about leaving with something, about refusing to let the title narrative swing dramatically on one afternoon. That context matters, because it shaped the emotion of everything that followed. The first half, though, was grim. There's no dressing it up. Celtic were second best in every department. The ball wouldn't stick, the passing lacked conviction, and in those 50-50 challenges it felt like Rangers were first to absolutely everything. You could see it in the body language. Too many rushed clearances, too many hopeful long balls, not enough composure. In these away derbies, control is everything, and Celtic had none of it early on. Rangers pressed aggressively, forced mistakes, and fed off the crowd's energy. It was frantic, and Celtic looked rattled. There were moments where you feared the worst. The defensive line seemed pinned deeper than usual, hesitant to step out, almost inviting pressure. When you allow a side like Rangers to build momentum at Ibrox, it becomes a tidal wave. The opener was a reminder of the fine margins at this level. A strike of real quality that leaves you shaking your head more than blaming anyone. Sometimes you just have to acknowledge the technique. But even after that, what concerned me more was the reaction. Celtic didn't settle. They didn't slow the game. They continued to look hurried, as if the occasion was dictating their decisions. Individually, a few players struggled badly in that opening period. The midfield lacked bite and composure, and too often the forwards were isolated. There's frustration in watching passes overhit, in seeing promising positions wasted by hesitation or poor touch. You expect intensity in a Glasgow derby, but intensity without control is dangerous. Rangers thrived on that chaos. They made it physical, they made it scrappy, and Celtic seemed uncomfortable in that environment. At halftime, it felt bleak. You try to cling to something positive, a passage of play, a moment of cohesion, but there wasn't much to hold on to. Yet if this Celtic side has shown anything over the season, it's that they can respond. They've flipped scripts before, and whatever was said in that dressing room, the shift in the second half was dramatic. Suddenly, the ball started moving with purpose. The tempo changed. Rangers, who had been snapping into tackles and closing down every angle, began to drop off slightly. Whether that was fatigue or a tactical tweak, it opened space, and Celtic finally exploited it. The midfield looked braver, taking the ball under pressure and turning instead of launching it long. That small change transformed the flow of the match. One substitution in particular altered the rhythm. The introduction of real composure in the center of the park gave Celtic a platform. Instead of forcing risky forward balls immediately, there was patience. Short passes, angles, movement. It forced Rangers to chase rather than dictate. And once the home side started retreating, you could sense the anxiety spreading through the stands. Football at this level is psychological as much as technical, and momentum is a powerful thing. Out wide, there was far more threat. Direct running, willingness to take a man on, to drive into space instead of recycling possession endlessly. That bravery pinned Rangers back. The defensive line, which had been camped near their own box for much of the first half, began to step up, winning aerial duels higher up the pitch, compressing the game, suffocating Rangers' attempts to break. It was a collective push, and you could feel belief growing with every regained ball. The equalizer, when it came, felt earned. Not fortunate, not gifted, but built from sustained pressure. It was the product of a side refusing to accept the narrative of collapse. And after that goal, the energy completely flipped. Rangers, who had looked so assured earlier, suddenly appeared unsure. Passes went astray. Clearances were rushed. Celtic sensed vulnerability and pressed even harder. Defensively, there was redemption too. A player who had endured a difficult opening period responded with aggression and authority after the break, winning headers, stepping into challenges, organizing the line. That kind of mental strength matters in a derby. It would have been easy to shrink after an early mistake. Instead, he grew into the contest and played a major role in Celtic hemming Rangers back for long spells. In goal, there wasn't much that could be done about the damage inflicted. The first strike was simply exceptional. The second, perhaps a fraction more preventable, but still delivered with speed and precision that catches any keeper off guard. Overall, there were no glaring errors between the posts, and in games of this magnitude, sometimes avoiding the catastrophic mistake is enough. What stood out most was the contrast in identity between the two halves. In the first, Celtic looked like a side overwhelmed by the occasion. In the second, they resembled a team chasing a title, confident in their structure and brave in possession. It begs questions about starting approach, about how to harness that second-half mentality from the first whistle. Because when Celtic play with that blend of composure and aggression, they are more than capable of dominating even at Ibrox. By the closing stages, it genuinely felt like only one side would find a winner. Rangers were clinging on, clearing lines, trying to break up play. Celtic were circulating the ball, probing, searching for that final incision. The frustration, of course, is that the first half damage forced them into that uphill battle. Had the opening 45 minutes mirrored the second, we might be talking about a statement victory rather than a hard-earned draw. Still, context matters. Leaving Ibrox unbeaten, especially after staring down the barrel early on, carries significance. It keeps momentum intact. It denies Rangers the surge they desperately wanted. And perhaps most importantly, it reinforces the idea that this Celtic side, for all their flaws, possess resilience. They can adapt. They can respond. And in a title race where margins are razor-thin, that psychological edge could prove decisive as the season barrels toward its climax. What really lingers a few hours after full-time is how sharply the mentality shifted once Celtic realized the game was there to be grabbed. In that first half at Ibrox Stadium, the tempo felt dictated by the home side, the noise cascading down from the stands every time a tackle flew in or a clearance was forced. But once Celtic steadied themselves, once the panic was replaced with purpose, you could almost hear that noise turn into nervous murmuring. That is the fine line in these derbies. One spell of authority can flip the entire emotional landscape. The midfield battle was fascinating after the restart. Where Rangers had swarmed and snapped in the opening 45, they suddenly looked half a yard slower. Celtic started demanding the ball in tighter pockets, trusting each other with short passes instead of launching it forward and hoping for scraps. That bravery in possession dragged Rangers out of shape. Angles opened up, overlaps began to appear, and instead of reacting to pressure, Celtic were applying it. It was a reminder that this side, when composed, can control the rhythm even in the most hostile environments. There was also a visible edge in the duels. Players who had been backing out of challenges earlier were now stepping in, shoulder to shoulder, refusing to be bullied. That physical response was crucial. You cannot win the tactical battle if you lose the psychological one. And in the second half, Celtic showed they were not prepared to be pushed around. Every header won, every second ball claimed, chipped away at the authority Rangers thought they had established. Out wide, the directness became a real weapon. Instead of recycling the ball endlessly, Celtic began attacking space with intent. Fullbacks overlapped with conviction, wingers drove inside, and suddenly Rangers were forced to defend facing their own goal. That is uncomfortable for any back line, particularly when the crowd senses vulnerability. You could see defenders gesturing, urging teammates to close gaps quicker, to track runners more tightly. It was a far cry from the assured, front-foot display they produced in the first half. Defensively, the line stepped up almost in unison. Rather than camping on the edge of their own box, Celtic compressed the pitch, winning possession higher and preventing Rangers from building with any calmness. It takes courage to push out like that at Ibrox, especially after conceding twice, but it paid off. The home side struggled to string passes together, and their attempts to relieve pressure often resulted in hopeful clearances straight back into Celtic territory. The resilience shown by individuals deserves credit as well. One error early in a derby can swallow a player whole, particularly when the crowd is baying for more. Yet there was a clear determination to respond, to show character rather than shrink. That reaction says a lot about the dressing room. It would have been easy to crumble after the second goal, to allow doubts to creep in and accept the narrative that the title race was slipping. Instead, the response was defiant. The equalizer did more than level the scoreline. It shifted belief. Suddenly, Rangers were the ones glancing at the clock, managing the tempo, trying to break momentum with stoppages. Celtic, by contrast, looked energized, as if the earlier frustration had been replaced with clarity. They circulated possession with patience, probing for that final opening. Even when moves broke down, the structure behind the ball was solid enough to prevent immediate counters, which had been a real threat earlier on. You could argue that the second half was the blueprint of what this side should aim for more consistently in these high-pressure away matches. Too often over the past year, performances in hostile grounds have been marked by hesitation and a lack of control. Here, once they settled, Celtic demonstrated that they are capable of imposing themselves even against their fiercest rivals. The key is finding that balance from the first whistle rather than after the interval. There is also the wider context of the title race. A defeat would have handed Rangers not only 3 points, but a surge of momentum and belief. A draw, especially one clawed back from a difficult position, feels very different. It denies the statement the home support craved. It keeps the pressure squarely shared rather than transferred entirely. In tight seasons, those psychological swings can be as decisive as any tactical tweak. For Celtic FC, this match highlighted both vulnerability and strength. The vulnerability lies in those sluggish starts, the spells where composure evaporates and simple passes become complicated. The strength lies in the response, in the ability to recalibrate mid-match and wrestle control away from a side that had looked dominant. Bridging that gap between first-half fragility and second-half authority will define how the remaining fixtures unfold. From the Rangers' perspective, there will be frustration at letting control slip. For long stretches, they executed their plan well, pressing aggressively and capitalizing on mistakes. But sustaining that intensity is demanding, and once their energy dipped slightly, they struggled to adapt. Against a side like Celtic, that window of vulnerability is all that is needed to turn the tide. As the clock ticked down, there was a sense that one more clean passage of play might settle it. Celtic continued to probe, shifting the ball from flank to flank, searching for a defensive lapse. Rangers retreated deeper, content to break up rhythm and see out the point. In those final moments, you could feel the tension ripple through the stadium, every touch scrutinized, every clearance greeted with either relief or groans. Walking away from Ibrox with a draw after such a chaotic contest will divide opinion. Some will focus on the dismal first half and argue that standards must rise. Others will point to the spirit shown in the second period and see it as evidence of a champion's mentality. The truth probably sits somewhere in between. There are clear lessons to be learned, particularly about managing the early stages of these massive encounters. But there is also undeniable credit due for refusing to accept defeat when the odds seemed stacked. Before we proceed, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications to receive all exclusive news about Celtic FC. Don't miss any details about your favorite team. It's extremely important for Celtic FC fans. The Scottish football scene has been left reeling after JPP made a shock announcement claiming the match that took place between Rangers and Celtic had, in effect, been cancelled. Cancelled after the fact, a notion that stirred up a fair bit of chatter across the terraces, the press boxes, and the pubs round about Glasgow. Official detail is thin on the ground, and that silence has only fueled speculation. Why folk trying to read between the lines. Whispers coming out of Hampton suggest the decision had little to do why what unfolded on the park, and mere to do why matters behind the scenes. Some sources are Materine boot a serious breach o protocol linked to pre-match operations, while others hint at paperwork irregularities that may have slipped through the cracks until it was hour. There's even quiet talk o concerns raised by independent observers, claims that certain conditions didn't meet standards expected for a fixture o sick magnitude. JPP's statement, brief and carefully worded, spoke o exceptional circumstances and ongoing internal review, phrases that have become code in Scottish sport for something far from routine. Supporters are left wondering what this means for the rivalry itself, a contest that's as much a boot history and identity as it is a boot 90 minutes of football. Pundits, meanwhile, are treading cautious, aware that a misstep in commentary could see them on the wrong side of a story that's still unfolding. Inside the game, there's a feeling this episode could set a precedent, raising awkward questions about governance and accountability. If a match of this stature can be retrospectively called into question, nay fixture is beyond scrutiny. For Noah, all that's certain is the uncertainty itself. Until JPP lifts the lid proper, Scottish football fans are left with rumors, raised eyebrows, and a sense that there's more to this saga than meets the eye. Hello, fan. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as it means a lot to Celtic FC. Also, share your opinion about the news in the comments below. See you in the next video.